Hello, welcome to This Is For Me. I'm your host, Trisha, as per usual. And this is for, I'm going to call it adult childhood trauma. Okay, guys, I don't even know completely where I'm going to go here. Not that I ever do, clearly. I mean, if you've listened once, you know that. I do have an outline once in a while though, but I'll just get into it. So, you can already tell, right? The sigh. First of all, this is a week late. I could not bring myself to record an episode last week. I have a family member who has Alzheimer's, and it's very sad and it's very difficult. And, this is just something that exists and it just goes on. It just goes on, and not like the Celine Dion song, not in a great way. It's it's pretty shitty. It's pretty horrible. So there was an incident last week that made me have to go to my parents. I'm trying to not be that like vague, but then I also want to like respect people, but then also this is my podcast and let's just be real, like two people listen. So it's fine. But okay. I live an hour away from my family. I'll say this. Okay, set up. I live an hour away from my family. The rest of my family all lives very close to each other. And I know an hour doesn't sound like a lot for a lot of people who live across the country, from their family or different continents. But for my family, who, again, they all live within like 5 or 10 minutes of each other, me moving an hour away was like a big deal. Like, I am detached and I've never been healthier. I've never been more mature. I've never felt as strong in my life, never felt as confident. It's really good for me because there's a lot of toxicity, and I know that's a word that's thrown around, but I do, have alcohol abuse in my family, which is why I sought that out in past relationships. We don't really need to go into that, but anyway, I really do find that the less involved in family affairs, the better. Now, not every member of my family is toxic, not at all. And I do love every single one of them, but just some of us live different lives. Some people are repeating childhood patterns, which is really hard to see. And then I think we all know parents, guys. You can't change them. You can't convince them to do therapy. You can't convince them to want to help themselves. Some people just don't want that. They want to be miserable and they also want to complain. And I have made myself no longer available for that, moving an hour away, right? Not accessible. And, you know, how you've heard there's three sides to every story, their side, your side, and the truth? Well, when it comes to finding out information about a family member who's in the hospital and you have to hear some information from siblings and then the tiniest amount from your parent who can't really be trusted to give you all the pertinent details or even care about the pertinent details, it's very difficult. So I was very stressed out last week, as I'll just say my stepfather. My stepfather went to the hospital and, it went from he might never come out to he's coming home to no, he's not going home to, there's nothing left in his brain. It was a heartbreaking week and it still is. My heart is broken. My voice is like not 100% there. And part of it is that I did just finish a shift of St. Patrick's Day weekend, and yesterday and today were insane. Guys, you would never think an Italian bakery would be as busy as like Thanksgiving for all of St. Patrick's Day weekend, but these people in upstate New York, guys, it is not springtime yet. They have very little things to celebrate and look forward to, so they will use any excuse, all right? It doesn't matter what their ethnicity is, they are eating it all and drinking it all and just consuming for St. Patrick's Day. So, anyway, between me crying for a week, basically, like every day, maybe I skipped a couple days, but I think I've cried at least a little every day. Um, and then working at a busy bakery, my voice isn't amazing. So apologies for that too. I just I just gotta say. So I saw my stepdad, which strangely enough, it seemed like my mother didn't really want me to see him because I kept trying to like find out if he was in the hospital, if he was home, where I could go. It was really weird that it seemed like she didn't want me to see him. And then I was told I was over. Well, through the grapevine, through a sibling, let me know that my mother said she didn't want to talk to me about anything, which she barely did anyway. She let me know basically that he was in the hospital, and then I had to pry for any other information, which I went to other sources for. But she said she didn't want to tell me anything because I'm too sensitive. Now, all right, a little background on me, guys. For years, my family would joke that I didn't have a heart or that I didn't have feelings, because I would never cry or really show emotion. This came from deep dive. She's 38 now, guys. 30 years ago, I was 8 years old, and I had an older brother, and he was 21, and he died. He died slipping on black ice in his car on his way home from his job. And, you really don't fully grasp the concept of death as a child. I proceeded that year in second grade to watch every single Freddy Krueger movie that had ever been made up until that point, and every single Jason movie, and several other B level horror movies, none of which were appropriate for an 8-year old, most of them having sexual themes and extreme violence. But yeah, neither one of my parents seemed to have a problem with that. So I was obviously fixated on getting some idea of what death was. Anyway, I did not cry after that really until, I don't know, years later. I mean, maybe briefly if I really hurt myself, but I want to say really until I was like 15 and my other brother got hit by a car and they thought he was going to die. Turns out he didn't, but that was like the first time I prayed to God, and I'm not religious, so I was just like, I'm sorry, if you can ever do anything for me, please don't let this happen. Please don't let him die. It was a really deep prayer I was saying to God on my way to the hospital with that one. But yeah, I cried for that. But anyway, my whole read on crying as a child was that nothing was worthy of crying about unless someone was dying. So, stop being dramatic, perk up, get over it, etc. That's also the result of living with a parent who, your needs were just a bother, another thing to do. So you wanted to be out of the way. You didn't want to cause a fuss, didn't want to cause trouble. So anyway, I didn't cry for a long time. And really, it's been maybe the past 4 years, pretty much since I've totally moved out on my own, because I am almost ashamed to say it, but it's my truth, so I just have to embrace it, that I lived in my parents' house until a very old age. I mean, I moved out when I was like 23 and lived with a boyfriend for a few years. And that was almost a 7-year relationship. Well, no, almost an 8 year. It was over 7. It doesn't matter. Anyway, when I broke up with him, I moved back in with my parents. And then when I started dating my last long term ex, I lived with my parents, but basically Friday through Sunday, I was living with him. And then I fully lived with him for a year and then broke up with him. and moved back in with my parents. The house is empty for about 7 months a year, guys, because they go to Myrtle Beach. So who could blame me? It was rent free lake house. You know what I mean? But I couldn't actually become an adult mentally without, moving out. So I hadn't really healed. I hadn't really done therapy. And since then, I've really come to think that my emotional vulnerability and emotional intelligence are some of my greatest strengths. And now here I am fully embracing that and actually have been told that I am one of the most emotionally intelligent people that a couple people I've ever met, actually. And these are smart people, so I'm gonna take that compliment to the heart and run with it. And then here's my mother saying I'm too sensitive. Well, what do we want? Is she heartless? Does she have no feelings? Is she a block of ice? And now she's too sensitive. Sorry, I care if my stepdad may or may not die this week. You know what I mean? And may or may not be getting the best care in the most vulnerable state a human can be, which is alive with your body somewhat functioning, your mind not functioning, and your ability to verbalize what is going on around you and the thoughts in your head, it's not happening. I can't imagine the prison that is inside of someone's head with Alzheimer's. It's horrifying, honestly, to think about. It really is. And it just made me think this whole week of trauma and really seeing it. I went, I visited, and I know this is a small thing. Some people take care of their loved ones who are sick. I cannot do that quite literally. I must work, and I know I couldn't do it emotionally. I couldn't do it physically. That's why we have nurses and facilities and everything else, because even if you love someone, we are just not all built for that, guys. And I know I'm not. And it got me thinking, though, about that phrase, how you don't you don't know what anyone's going through. You can't judge someone until you walked a mile in their shoes, right? Well, I want to add on to that you don't know what someone's going through unless you've had their parent as a parent. Because having to visit both my parents, one, very much incapacitated, the other one overtired, and going through this as well, but not they have no tools, guys. My mother has no tools from therapy and no healthy coping mechanisms at all. Zero. And it just brings back all of your wounds. You can see them when you're with this person, all the emotional scars. It's like a playbook in your head of, oh, this is why this happened. This is why I had to fix this. This is why I still deal with this. So I just am looking at my fellow man a little differently this week, and I hope it continues in kind of the way that people say you should reparent yourself. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with reparenting, and you look at yourself as a child and almost like a second part of you, like there's this kind of shadow self and it's your child self, and you think about what they needed, and you can have a lot more sympathy for yourself now and empathy for yourself now. And as you're going through certain scenarios that might mimic childhood, you can give yourself the love that you needed, right? And the compassion that you needed. And I'm looking at my fellow man and thinking about maybe I'm annoyed with them. Maybe I'm angry with them, but then I have no idea, not just what their day to day is, because that's easy to judge, right? If you say, I know their family, I know their job, I've seen their house, XYZ. But guys, we don't know, and we can never imagine what it was like to be a child of someone else. We can imagine, and there's certainly people I've met where I think, oh my God, what must it have been like to be your child? Like, what a dream. What a beautiful life experience. This person is going to be so well adjusted and really contribute to society. I can know all this, but I can't change what my experience has been. So I'm just going to keep this a brief one. I'm really worn out from the week. I just wanted to, this is for me. So I wanted to just go through this little episode by giving you slash myself an update, a download of what the past week has been. And I will say this: I took one day off to cry when I first heard that my stepfather didn't have any activity going on in his brain, because that's really heartbreaking. And and then I took another day off to go see him, and that was also heartbreaking. I'm going through that about every night, just visualizing different parts of that experience and crying about it. Um, and then I had a snow day, which seems great because I needed more time to really rest. I'm dehydrated. But when I came back to work, and this has been a busy week, I mean, by the end of today, I was really done. I was over it. But I gotta say, the first 2 days of my week, I was so happy to have work. So happy to be distracted and busy and surrounded by people. And I know that the people I work with love me, some more than others, but I do know that we are like a second family, and they have a lot of love for me. And that gave me more sympathy too for people that can't work for one reason or another, and they don't have an escape, and they don't have the luxury of being too busy to think, because at times that is the best escape, better than any drugs you could have, just being too busy to think. So there's some food for thought. I am going to go switch my laundry now and really just zone out for this weekend, and hopefully do some healing, do some processing. And I really hope I have some good news, or at least I'm just, a little bit funnier, a little bit sassier next week when I talk to you guys. Until then, follow me on TikTok at Trisha Kemi, follow me on Instagram at Trisha Kemi, and YouTube, Trisha Kemi. Thank you.